Hello and welcome back to another Journey for the Book Club live event. As always, I'm your host, Isabelle Wilkinson, and I have the wonderful job of looking after the Journey for the Book Club. And we are a community of nearly 1,500 readers who work as CEOs, founders, thought leaders, and marketers at some of the UK's most exciting businesses. And being busy, ambitious people, we know that it can be incredibly difficult to find time to continue learning and developing ourselves as we go about our day-to-day tasks and many jobs that we have to do. So our job at the book club is to serve as an antidote to that and to take the latest and greatest business and marketing books and serve them up in bite-sized summaries and insights, so you feel like you've read the books in less of the time. So if you're not already part of the book club, now is your chance to get involved. There'll be a link in the comments during this conversation. Just hit that, pop in your email address, and you'll start receiving our weekly newsletters, podcasts, events, and much more. On to the good stuff. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Isabelle Uviebinené about her brand new book, The Reset. I've got my copy here. And The Reset is subtitled Ideas to Change How We Work and Live. And Liz is a multi-award-winning writer, speaker, and more recently columnist at the Financial Times. She co-authored the critically acclaimed Slay in Your Lane, The Black Girl Bible, which won numerous awards in 2018. And she currently works as a brand strategist on campaigns for household names like Nike and Bumble. But we're most importantly going to be talking about her latest book today. And the topic of conversation is all about burnout, busyness, and asking the all-important question of what is possible now when it comes to work that would have seemed impossible in a pre-COVID world. So without further ado, welcome, Liz.
Hi, everyone.
How's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. I was admiring your bookcase before we came on, but yeah, you've got lots of good ones in there. So we're here to talk about The Reset. First of all, congratulations on having your book out. Where did the idea come from to write about our relationships with work and company culture and burnout?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I think it was, but it was so many little tiny moments that kind of ladder up into a bigger thing. So obviously I wrote Slay in Your Lane a few years ago, and that jump off came from, our relationship, Black women's relationship in work. So I guess I was noticing trends over the years about how people wanted to work differently, and ultimately a tension between the values people had around work and how they wanted to work differently. And there was a real conflict around that. And I think there was a conflict I saw across generations, across different demographics, race and gender, people who were parents and people who weren't parents. And it all kind of laddered up into the same theme that work wasn't working, and people were really kind of like, experiencing things such as burnout, loneliness, depression, anxiety in various ways. So I think when the pandemic hit, I'd already started writing the book and already started kind of like, floating these ideas around, and it just took on a whole new kind of like, I guess, kind of like way of doing things, because you can't write about work and life on the backdrop of, one of the most craziest things that's happened since, World War II. So I think it kind of morphed into what we have today, which is, ideas to change how we work and live.
And how did you feel when the pandemic hit and you were already writing about work change? I bet that was really interesting to watch that unfold. How did that feel?
It was very intense, because I've been writing about work for a while. I have a column at the Financial Times that I've had for a few years now, and it felt like the whole world was kind of like talking about the same thing, and so it felt really intense. And writing a book about work and the whole world is kind of talking about these themes, I would say it's a different writing experience, and one I would never recommend for anybody. because you're constantly kind of like double guessing yourself and second guessing yourself, and you're thinking, so it's just, as a writer, writing in that kind of pressure cooker around, work and something like this going on, such as the pandemic, was definitely overwhelming. But I think it just what kept me going was a real kind of burning desire to kind of link all these themes together. So yeah, I think it was definitely challenging, but yeah, good things always are.
Yeah, and a testament to you for even through that particularly difficult time that you've still produced this amazing book. So you explain in the book how we need to rethink how we as individuals kind of respond to work, but more importantly, how we fit into a wider ecosystem when it comes to work. And you break the book down into 6 sections, which we'll come back to shortly, but where you explain we need to start thinking more holistically about work. To focus on the individual first, why do you think it is that so many people have their personal identity tied up in work?
I think for me, the most simplest answer is definitely comes down to the fact that we spend so much time at work. So, it would make a lot of sense that we would end up having a real emotional, attachment to somewhere we spend a lot of time in. And I think that's not necessarily the bad thing, because that's just life. We have to work. I think it's our relationship with the identity that can, prove to be toxic when we keep, glorifying a lot of habits and glamorizing habits that kind of lead us into, like I said, to start the book, an introduction, things such as, loneliness, depression, anxiety. And just real toxic habits. And I think that's the real issue. We spend so much time at work, that's just fact. But we don't interrogate enough some of the kind of practices that we've all kind of taken on, and some of the things that we think are particularly normal, and we just keep, we're always on, we're on that treadmill. So I think that the reason why identities are, it's our self-worth, it's how we express ourselves, it's how we, when you meet somebody, you ask them, you know their name, and the next thing is, what do you do? So yeah. It's just part and parcel of the life that we live. I think we just don't interrogate it enough, and I think that was what just really, I guess, sparked my interest. And I always say that in the way we work and our workplaces, we kind of default to a real parent-child relationship where we somehow divorce ourselves from a lot of agency, and it's the only kind of, I guess, space that we somehow shrink, and we don't tend to ask a lot of questions, and we just go with the flow. And I think that for me, with this book, it was a real kind of opportunity more than anything, just to be curious. I'm not an expert in, as you said, the book has different layers and things like that, and I'm not an expert in city planning, or an expert in some of the different areas that I've kind of I fleshed out. But I think the main thing was kind of interrogating the way we work and how that is linked to the way we live, and saying these two things aren't divorced. And but we know that what's happened over the last 18 months has shown us that, they're very much inextricably linked.
Absolutely. And that is one of the most wonderful parts about the book for me, is that you've gathered information from such a diverse and exciting group of people who are really being very progressive in the areas that they work in, to get this picture of what the future of work can look like. And so I just wonder, going back to obviously thinking about the agency we have over our jobs, you write in the introduction of the book about how obviously COVID hit, and we were all like, okay, you used to say, well, I couldn't work anywhere but next to you, with you holding a hand on my shoulder. And then people proved they could do that. And there were so many think pieces out about how it changed the future of work. But you write in the start of the book that actually people have started to realize that actually nothing has changed at all. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think that some of the same habits that we experienced when we were doing 9 to 5 days a week in the office, we just kind of transferred that back to our kitchen tables, or wherever, our bedrooms essentially, because I feel like it's the tools. We focus so much on the technology at the start of the pandemic, and it became about Zoom and all of these different ways that we were able to communicate, and we had to keep going and have that line of continuation. But I guess that some of the real things that make a workplace inclusive, such as belonging and feeling like you're trusted, some of the things that I guess are less tangible, things like community, they were suffering anyway in the workplace, like, you know, lack of trust between your boss, presenteeism. That's only going to get kind of amplified, if not made totally worse, by being divorced from, you know, having, you know, in some cases, a totalitarian manager who, you know, can't let go. So I think it didn't necessarily, I guess, change our habits, it just made them worse. And I think my point in the introduction was just to set up and say, if we do not, I guess, culturally reset the way we see the way our attitudes to work, and nothing's going to change. All we'll end up talking about are things such as Zoom, and, you know, that share price goes up, and it becomes an echo chamber of just like people who want to work from home versus the people who want, you know, greater flexibility, people who want to work from home and greater flexibility in how they want to work versus people who want to be in the office. And that's how the debate started to kind of like shape. And it was just like, it's not that simple. What we've had over the last 18 months is not a flexible working utopia. So we're all wrong. Like, we're all kind of like, it's the blind leading the blind. This is not it. What we have now is to reset a few fundamental things that were great, you know, that we gained around the pandemic, but ultimately, like the way we, the mindset is where, to be honest, like we really need to focus on.
And that statement that you just said about the blind leading the blind, one of my favorite examples in the book of a leader who looks like they got it right during the pandemic was Cassandra Stavru from Proper, and how she was so open with her staff, with her team, and communicating that I have no idea what's going on either. This is my first global pandemic too. Like, we're in this together. And I think that point about communication is one that gets overlooked in the nuance of these think pieces that come out about the future of work. Is everybody's going to be working just Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office? The level of autonomy is still not there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to look at these other areas then that you write in the book, and you've gathered this information about how we can look at things at a more holistic level, you break the book down into the individual kind of culture, businesses themselves, and then on a wider level, communities, cities, and wider society. How can we then, with those things in mind, how can we start to look at the communities we're in and to build better in a kind of post-COVID world?
Would you say that in terms of our local communities or our work communities?
I think, well, we've all seen a lot of an increased interest in the local community. And so how do we kind of apply that to our work communities in a way that still gives people the freedom to be who they want to be?
So the thing about communities, it's a very intangible at times thing to kind of point and say, this is the blueprint of what community is. The point of that chapter was to explore the fact that we work in such a way that goes against the values of community. So a lot of the time, you know, the way we work and the things that we value, it goes against that, and the level of individualism that we kind of like drive into our careers and our personal ambitions kind of divorces us from things such as empathy and connecting with other people. So that was the kind of like, I guess, the jump off around the fact that we have stats that talk around the fact that you know, loneliness is a real kind of problem in different types of communities. And one of the stats that was quite shocking for me, as you know, being a millennial myself, was the fact that millennial women fear loneliness more than they fear a cancer diagnosis, and how, you know, people are, you know, desperately unhappy in how they're working. To answer your question about how we can drive this level of, I guess, you know, greater community amongst the way we work, I think to understand that first and foremost we are social beings. Like, I think we've seen over the last year that even the most introverted, you know, I like to work with myself kind of person has, you know, we need that personal connection. You can't be against human contact, as you know, as I think Sadiq Khan speaks around. And so we have some more of a mindset thing that no man is an island. and we need to kind of integrate that in the way we kind of see our work and the way we see our kind of local communities. And I think the beauty of you know what's happened is people are tapping into their local communities, and they're seeing we've spent so much more time in there. Things such as, you know, 15-minute cities, and the way our high streets in the UK, like we've seen, you know, it's changed. The British High Street, the Great British High Street is, you know, is undergoing a lot of changes. How is that going to ladder up into how we work and how we've been working for the past year? So there's something, you know, 15-minute cities being able to like live, work, essentially play within, you know, a 15-minute radius of your current home, and kind of seeing the way that is gonna, these are questions that I'm asking, and how we integrate that in how we integrate that into how we work and live comes down to people really, I guess, recognizing first and foremost that we have a voice, and our voices are stronger together. And it's not going to be a case of we go back to the workplace and you have individuals saying, this is what I want to do. It's about coming together and really understanding that, you know, it's not just about one single person. This isn't a mother issue or a parent issue, or, you know, or it's everyone's issue. And I feel like kind of see some of the challenges around the way we work is we kind of isolate them as a diversity issue, this issue. This is not a me issue. So it's again a mindset thing that I wanted to kind of set out at the start of the book around community, and there's a bit of philosophy in there by, you know, Indy Johar, who talks around the fact that, you know, as human beings, some of the greatest things we've ever achieved is through the process of collaboration. And then, you know, I talk around the practicalities of that, and things such as, you know, the 15-minute city and high streets for all, being able to kind of ebb and flow between the way we work at home to working, you know, in your local high street, rather than, you know, you have a betting shop, you know, 3 betting shops on a high street. One of them can be changed into a sustainable work environment, workspace. We see that in cities in Paris, like that. Paris is, you know, is at the forefront of this, like a different is at the forefront of, like, you know, the 15-minute journey, and how they are kind of like positioning how, you know, they're changing things. So these are like possibilities, and things are undergoing a real change and a real reset. So it's again a real kind of mindset shift to kind of say, yeah, community building is it's something that we need to kind of factor in when we go back out, essentially.
Thank you. Yeah, and so then throughout the book, you, as you said, you spoke to various business leaders and community builders and founders and politicians and decision makers and all these people who are, as we say, kind of understanding what the future of work might look like. How did you go about choosing the people to speak to about this topic, about the future of work specifically?
It was so random. I think I started with, like, I guess my own personal kind of, you know, people that I've met over the years that I found super interesting, and people just had like interesting viewpoints around areas such as empathy, areas that so it just came from a natural, you know, curiosity from that point of view, and I think that how I was able to kind of like pinpoint what questions to ask them was just, I guess, what I wanted to know about things such as how would you, you know, Cassandra Stratford, who runs Proper, who's a founder of Proper, how was she faring in lockdown? So these things I think it was like a snowball. When I spoke to one person, it laddered up into speaking to somebody else, because I didn't plan to speak about cities when I first started out. Like it was definitely not what was on the cards. And then when I started really realizing, you know, if we change the way we work, that's going to affect, you know, cities are the vehicles to our ambition. If we're no longer doing 5 days a week, or we have an appetite to not do 5 days a week in an office, how does that change where we play? Like what do we go into the city for? It's not saying you know, everyone needs to move out of the city and all of that sort of stuff, but it's saying that that inevitably will change. So when I kind of came to that question, I was like, well, who is the Mayor of London? Sadiq Khan. I've interviewed him before and I've spoken to him before about things. So it was trying to get in contact with him. So it was just a very, as you can tell, one question led to another, and it led to like a Pandora's box, and you've got the reset.
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the things that is so refreshing about it. You know, it's quite a light book, but but you really think through the repercussions of, as you say, we've seen the unexpected repercussions of us all working from home because we have no other choice over the last 12 months or so. But thinking kind of, it's a responsible way of looking to think, how is this going to impact the other ways that we interact as well? So I wanted to know of the people you spoke to, what was the kind of one most insightful bit of information that you personally got from those conversations?
There was so many, and it's like the reset, I would say, you know, it's very smart thinking, like I said, light read, and it's not meant to bombard you with it's not meant to be so dense. So I would say the one thing that sticks out and I still think about is how it's empathy. I think Serena Abbasi, who's the diversity and inclusion lead, head of culture and diversity in worldwide, M&C Saatchi, she speaks a lot about empathy. She speaks about empathy in such a beautiful way, and you don't necessarily see a lot of, you know, it's not when we speak about people, we cannot divorce them of context and their kind of like, you know, where, like, what their ambitions and and who they are and where they want to go in life. And sometimes when we talk about work, it gets so narrow, it gets so rigid, and it gets so process driven that we forget that ultimately we're in the business of people, and, you know, we need to, you know, we need greater understanding and drive, you know, facilitate greater understanding between us all, because, you know, that's what unites us. So I love the way, you know, Serena Abbasi talks about empathy elsewhere, like outside of my book. So if you go read about her, she's amazing. So when I wanted to kind of ask her about, you know, empathy and how, and start from a place of trust and these types of things that can feel very intangible when we talk about the workplace, hearing her it was just really beautiful for me. And I think that I always say, you know, the world would be a better place and would face different types of challenges if we had greater empathy at the heart of it. And I think that what we've seen over the last year is we're starved of it, and we do need it. And we cannot divorce people of their context and have an understanding is for me, it's just the the most important thing in, you know, driving true change.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with that. We've got time for one question from the audience. So if you've got something you'd like to ask Liz, please do pop it in the comments now. I will ask you my last question, which is, so obviously we're speaking today on behalf of the Journey Further Book Club. So if you could recommend one book to our members, what would it be and why?
I would recommend Emma Gannon's book called Sabotage, because I think sometimes in order to make change, you need to get out of your own way, and there are loads of people who was, like we said at the start of the conversation, so wedded to the old way of doing things for so many reasons: fear, anxiety, just lack of, like, there's so many reasons. And I feel like that book is a very pithy start to kind of getting out of your own way and, you know, getting out of your own head and you know, making that change.
Amazing. And yeah, going back to the point about empathy, it's having empathy for yourself as well. Emma writes many of the titles that we read in the book club. So last question we have from Katie. She says, what is your number one tip from the book for helping us to avoid burnout?
Boundaries, 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 boundaries. Boundaries are the path, the new priorities, are the pathways to just better living. Like, honestly, I cannot, as somebody who loves to say yes to so many things, and you know, that scarcity mindset comes from the place of just you feeling like it's not enough. So I always say boundaries, and that for me starts from recognizing what I need to do to be like Elizabeth and be whole and you know, my mum always says, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I'm such a believer in that. And at age 29, I see that so much. And when that burnout feeling starts to encroach, that I can't give anything to anybody. So I always say, work out what you want from your work and what you want from your life, like map it out. Doesn't have to be in great detail, and there's going to be pitfalls in that, and there's going to be things that don't necessarily, I guess, align, and then you'll be able to see it very clearly. And then when you know that, that's why the book starts this book starts around, starts with the individual, but it doesn't end there, because once you start with yourself, you're able to communicate, your needs, your all of these things to other people, and then you're able to kind of like prioritize, in a very important meeting, the way you prioritize, you won't prioritize your health the same way you prioritize a very important meeting. Like I love swimming. Absolutely love it. It's something that I try and do every Friday afternoon. Obviously lockdown before has been very, not really good at it.
Yeah.
But it means that, that's in my diary. It's not I'll just do it when I feel like it, because I know that's a very important part of being ready and being able to kind of turn up on Monday morning or whatever. So I feel like boundaries for yourself first and foremost, and as well as respecting people's boundaries, is definitely something I'd say helps avoid. It's one step in terms of avoiding burnout.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Liz. And some wonderful comments that you'll have to check out after this. But thank you so much for your time and for writing the reset. You can all get a hold of the reset anywhere you buy your books online. We have one on our Journey Further bookshop page, and you can also go into physical bookshops to pick it up. Have you been into a bookshop to pick up your copy yet?
Not yet. I've been working a little bit too much, so I haven't had the chance. But this weekend,
I hope you get a chance. Cool. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.